The new measures and conditions that are being introduced for exploration of untapped resources in the EEZ of Mauritius will allow better control of activities and the possibility of identification of new fishing grounds and improved knowledge on fish stocks and untapped resources. Untapped resources in our waters that have not been exploited include, amongst others, horse mackerels, squids, lobsters, deep water shrimps. So exploratory fishing would have to be conducted to identify the diversity and distribution of these untapped resources. Tapping into the economic potential of the ocean while at the same time protecting this resource requires thoughtful policy, planning, and management. With this in mind, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mauritius decided to bring necessary amendments to the Finance Bill to be in line with its economic development strategy, with an objective to double the contribution of the blue economy to GDP by 2025. It created a blue economy roadmap which aims at making use of the untapped value of the country's ocean resources by sustainably coordinating the use of resources. In this connection, the country endowed a new Ministry for the Blue Economy, Marine Resources, Fisheries, with the authority to coordinate and manage, as I said, ocean-related activities. Mr. Speaker, sir, in view of the crucial role played by the Port Louis Harbour in the economic development of the country, and in line with government policy, this government has embarked on the expansion, diversification, and modernization of the port infrastructure with a view to supporting its economic activities. In this connection, as announced in the 2020-2021 budget, government would invest $2.2 billion into the construction of a fishing port, a breakwater, and a cruise terminal building with a clear vision to provide state-of-the-art infrastructure to the business community. The objective of this project is to ensure that Mauritius becomes a regional maritime hub in the Indian Ocean. The construction of a fishing port at Fort William will definitely boost the fisheries sector, as ports play a major role in the fishing industry, as well as give vessels and crews access to essential services and supplies, and enable vessel operators to land their catch. Mr. Speaker, sir, the main types of fisheries in Mauritius, namely the artisanal off-lagoon fisheries, the semi-industrial fisheries, the bank fisheries for demersal, the industrial longline and purseiner fishing, Mauritius is already a seafood hub and one of the biggest tuna exporters to the European Union from the African, Caribbean, and Pacific group of countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, this government is fully committed to making the blue economy a key industry to sustain economic diversification, job creation, and wealth generation. This is reflected by the small island development states identifying the blue economy as a tool for sustainable development. Along with other countries in the region, such as Seychelles and South Africa, we consider that marine-based economic activities such as fisheries, marine transport, and potentially offshore mineral exploration are crucial to growth. Mr. Speaker, sir, in view of the significant marine living resources lying within the maritime zones of the Republic of Mauritius, investors are being encouraged to participate in the development of the local fishing fleet by registering and operating the vessel under the Mauritian flag. Thus, the amendment brought to Section 2 of the Fisheries and Marine Resources Act will enable the registration, survey, and operation of fiberglass fishing vessels, irrespective of their lengths under the aforesaid Act. There will no longer be the requirement for fishing vessels made of fiberglass of 24 meters and above to be registered under the Merchant Shipping Act. This was a long-awaited measure by many stakeholders in the fishing sector. Since its announcement, local companies have shown keen interest for catch of both demersal and pelagic fish on such fishing vessels, and my ministry has started receiving several application and queries. A special desk has been set up to assist promoters who wish to benefit from this scheme. It is worth noting that worldwide, most fishing nations are using fiberglass fishing vessels as they are less costly in terms of maintenance and operations, including bunkering and fishing campaigns, tends to be of lesser duration. I wish to inform the House that back in the 90s, there were around 17 steel industrial bank fishing vessels, such as Talbot, those who remember Sea Falcon. Presently, we are left with only 3. The more so, foreign labor has to be hired by these companies, given that Mauritian fishers are reluctant to undertake long fishing campaigns of 2 to 3 months. All these factors led to the industry being at the brink of extinction. I wish to point out that the paradox was that we have been issuing fishing licenses to foreign flagged fiberglass vessels of 24 meters and above to fish in our EZ, and local investors were deprived of this opportunity to use fiberglass vessels. With this measure, we are going to stop the discrimination against our Mauritian counterparts. Oui, Monsieur le Président, je réitère que cette mesure annoncée dans le budget pour l'année 2021-2022 sera une mesure forte qui va sans aucun doute booster le secteur de la pêche. Provision is also being made in Section 22 of the Fisheries and Marine Resources Act for the introduction of a trusted trader certificate to be issued to largely compliant importers who have a good track record in terms of adherence to norms and standards. The new trusted trader program will facilitate trade for largely compliant importers of certain categories of products which are imported frequently and for a defined validity period. The trusted trader certificate will act as an incentive for importers to comply with standards, thus reducing default rates and aspire to becoming trusted traders. When an importer is certified a trusted trader, he will be exempted from the requirement from an import permit for a defined period. In terms of operating mechanism, the importer would be requested to submit this certificate to customs at times of import and when the goods are cleared by customs. The latter will immediately inform the relevant authority, which may also carry out post controls on the goods cleared. This program is meant to facilitate trade, reduce administrative costs, and eliminate demurrage charges, especially at a time when shipping costs are skyrocketing. The program will also make provisions for cancellation and suspension of the certificate in case of non-compliance. It is noteworthy that the certificate will not be a blanket approval to an importer for any product. The certificate will specify the products which is being certified, the validity period, and can be extended to mention the exporter, as well as if an importer is used to importing a particular product of a particular brand from a particular supplier from a particular country and without compliance issues, then only the certificate may be issued. My ministry will also define the qualifying criteria for being eligible to a trusted trader certificate. Businesses complying with the provision of the Trusted Trader Program will be viewed as low risk and will benefit from priority treatment at the border, meaning faster customs processing and fewer interventions. Should a cargo examination be required, the particular trusted trader will receive priority processing, especially with the case of perishable goods. The Customs Department and other stakeholders have agreed to adopting the principle. The intent of this budget measure is to promote ease of doing business by reducing administrative hassles in the import of fish and fish products, while at the same time guaranteeing the supply of quality fish and fish products on the local market so that the Mauritian citizens get value for money. The Trusted Trader Certificate will act as a barrier against fraudulent practices on the part of importers for fear of losing their status of trusted trader who dump seafood products in Mauritius, especially those which reach their expiry dates. Mr. Speaker, sir, as mentioned earlier, provisions have been made to repeal the Fishermen Investment Trust Act. On this issue, I would like to come back on the remarks made by Honorable Member Navarre-Marie in the early morning of Wednesday and this morning on radio. Monsieur le Président, Je refute catégoriquement la remarque de l'honorable Navarre-Marie sur le fait que la fermeture du FIT a été faite en catimini. Je tiens à préciser que la décision pour la fermeture du trust a été prise lors d'une session spéciale du board du trust le 12 novembre 2018, soit dit en passant un an avant que je fasse signer le portfolio du ministère de l'économie bleue. Cette décision fut prise suite au rapport soumis par le Office of Public Sector Governance en mai 2015, comme mentionné dans ma réponse aux questions parlementaires B837. D'ailleurs, mention a été faite dans le rapport du directeur de l'audit sur la gestion du FIT. Je rassure que la fermeture du FIT se fait dans la transparence et que toutes les procédures nécessaires ont été enclenchées pour le transfert de 2 employés du trust ainsi que de ses biens. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to remind my colleagues that the Fishermen Investment Trust was established in 2007 as a body corporate under provisions of the Fishermen Investment Trust Act of 2006, with a view to enhancing the socio-economic condition of the fisher community. However, the FIT failed to meet its objectives and to honor its mandate as the project initiated were not successful, as a result of which the FIT stopped operating since 2015. It is very sad to note that the business model adopted by the FIT under the Labour Party regime lacked any clear thinking process or planning, and at the very outset was bound to be a fiasco, un bébé mort-né. En principe, Monsieur le Président fait une vente rêve avec nos bonnes pêcheurs. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is clear that those people who had conceived the project had no business acumen at all and results in a waste of scarce public fund. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that since the start of the Fishermen Investment Trust in 2007 up to 2014, the real revenue generated has been only 1,968,102 rupees derived from sale of quota, 1.6 million, commission on sea cucumber partnership, 158,000 rupees, rent from lease of fishing vessel Megza 1 and Fit 1, 160,000 rupees. While the following amount was paid for the same period to these officers and officials. During the period, I want to say 2007 to 2014, the CEOs, there were 2 CEOs, 8,035,000 rupees, 035,345 rupees. The chairman, there were 2 chairmen, 1,958,199 rupees. And the board members were paid 723,199 rupees. So actually, the income generated was approximately 2 million, and what was paid only to the CEO, chairman, and board members was almost 10.6 million rupees. In a spirit of transparency, I'm tabling the consolidated cash flow statement of the FIT and would request to Honorable Navarre-Marie to get enlightened. It is nearby, her colleague next to her, Honorable Amemia, who is an accountant, I'm made to understand, before making all sorts of false and malicious allegations. However, I thank the Honorable Member for raising this issue, which has given me the opportunity to reveal the Labour Party, PMSD, and the Mouvement Rodriguez wrongdoings. FIT was clearly a special purpose vehicle set up by Honorable Boulel, that is the Labour Party and others, for the benefit of a privileged few, means the petit copain, and obviously not for that of fishermen. In the year 2007 and 2008, the only revenue generated by FIT, apart from obviously interest income on bank balance, was 84,000 rupees, following sale of quota for fish. In the same year, the CEO, Mr. A.K.B., was paid a total amount of 805,378 rupees. And the chairperson, Mr. JD, this one is the PMSD, a total amount of 178,651 rupees. Just imagine, the revenue being 84,000, and look at the salaries of these people. Additionally, in the same period, the board fees amounted to 79,000 rupees, and air tickets for board members amounted 48,000 rupees. Mr. Speaker, sir, again in the year 2008 and 2009, again, apart from interest income, income from commission of sea cucumbers and others amounted to only 108,479 rupees. However, again, the CEO, Mr. AKB, was paid a total amount of 1,022,464 rupees. Over and above, the chairperson was paid a sum of 227,955, and board fees amounting to 85,758, and air tickets again 38,000 rupees. In the year 2009-2010, again, apart from interest income, revenue generated by the FIT from sale of quota was 253,000. Again, the CEO was paid a total amount of 1,037,000 rupees, and the chairperson an amount of 325,800 rupees. Again, in the year 2010-2011, revenue generated amount to approximately 500,000 rupees, and again, the CEO, Mr. AKB, was paid 841,000, and the chairperson 230,000. And this cinema went on and on and on. In 2013, revenue generated by the FIT amounted 450,000. Now a new CEO, Mr. SH, was paid 1.17 million. And Mr. GS, this one again a new chairman from Mouvement Rodriguez, I think. They were in alliance, of course. The chairperson this time, the FIT was drowning, but the remuneration of the CEO and the chairperson increased to this time 360,000 rupees. I said fees increased despite the fact that FIT chipekule. That was Labour government. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2014, revenue generated amount to 400,000. Again, the CEO was paid 1.41 million, and the chairperson 360,000 again. FIT was already dead by that time, but the Labour Party nominees kept on bâtissant FIT. Mr. Speaker, sir, as from 2015, FIT has neither a CEO nor a chairperson. However, my ministry has been providing monthly grants to FIT from 2015 to meet up the staff costs and other office running expenses. The revenue generated from 2007 to 2014 can be summarized as 6,253,992 rupees for the whole 2007 to 2014, and the payment effected for, as I said, for Mr. CEO AKB, CEO Mr. SH, and I think I've got also the name for two other members, the chairman. I'll just check it out. The total amount of 10.6 million represent more than 60%. Can you imagine? Honorable Amami is here. I'll just give him this. Can advise Honorable Aryan Navar. The total amount of 10.6 million represent more than 60% of the 17 million grant provided by government. Mr. Speaker, sir, from this analysis it becomes crystal clear that the FIT was set up with government funds so that a few people can enjoy. In fact, the CEO, the chairperson, and the board members were paid for doing nothing. Since its setting up in 2007, as I said, up to 2014, the FIT has barely generated revenue. from its expected normal activities. Up to 2014, the government grant of 17 million was mainly used to pay the two different CEOs, the chairperson and the board members. Mr. Speaker, sir, I can now sadly say that the FIT was a special purpose vehicle to case les petits copains and pour mettre PCR dans casier, by luring them with 300 share certificates. FIT was in fact designed to fail with huge salaries for CEOs, chairperson and board members, and without any clear plan for FIT to generate revenue and to grow. Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel sorry for all the 4,461 fishers in Mauritius and Rodrigues who were each allocated 300 shares at 10 rupees. Here I must say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that le gouvernement d'alors fait une couillonne ban camarades pêcheurs. They have been left only with a certificate with no commercial or exchange value. The more so, the project regarding the lease of Megzaen and FIT1 could never generate revenue that could have been used by the trust to remunerate its shareholders in terms of the payment of dividend to shareholders. To conclude, on the Fishermen Investment Trust, also known as FIT, Mr. Speaker, sir, I must say the setting up of this institution was, as we say it in Creole, fit dans Badia, cooked by the Labour Party. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, sir, I have to convey to this House the immense miseries and false expectations which fishermen of Mauritius and Rodrigues have been subject with the failure of the FIT. I have also to admit my feel for them. However, I do assure the House that this government will not leave any stone unturned to uplift their low moral. Innovative schemes will be given to them for a real benefit. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is an undisputable fact that with developments in the blue economy sector, which is being called upon to reinvigorate as an important pillar of the Mauritian economy, there is need to have a modern, dynamic, and robust legal framework to address emerging issues. The proposed amendments are not only urgent but necessary to bring a boost to the fishing industry, and the existing administrative and legal framework will be reinforced through the making of a subsidiary legislation to further open up this sector of the economy. It is an aberration that as an island nation with such a vast EEZ, we are still heavily dependent on the import of fish and fish products, where we literally import about 60% of our consumption. Therefore, the strategy adopted by the government is twofold. First, it is high time for the fishing industry to increase export-led industries, thereby bringing more foreign income to the country. And secondly, there's a need to reduce our dependence on the import on fish and fish products, especially during these uncertain times of economic downturn due to COVID-19. With these words, Mr. Speaker, sir, I commend the bill to the House. Are the above amendments will pave the way for accelerated development in this crucial sector, especially post-COVID-19 era. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to talk on the Finance Bill 2021. Let me refer to Section 30 of the Finance Bill, which is proposing to repeal the Fishermen Investment Trust Act. We just heard the Minister of Blue Economy, Marine Resources, Fisheries, and Shipping, and was waiting him to reply to Honorable Ariane Navarre-Marie on her multiple concerns regarding the repealing of the Fishermen Investment Trust Act. But I will say I am a bit disappointed that a Minister of the Republic is talking about Badia, he's talking about Casier, instead of coming and showing us the way forward, what his ministry is going to do for these fishermen. He should have He shouldn't take fishermen for granted. He shouldn't think that the fishermen cannot think. This is very, very important. He again shifted the blame to the period prior to 2014. But what did his ministry do to support the Fishermen Investment Trust since 2015 to keep it afloat? We need a bilan. Where is the bilan? I leave it to the fishermen of our country, of my constituency, and of the whole country to draw their own conclusions regarding the cavalier way the Fishermen Investment Trust Act will be repealed with a deadly blow of a lethal harpoon, to use a marine metaphor. Let me refer to the budget speech of my good friend, Honorable Fabrice David, on 14th June 2021, where inter alia, he said that the Fishermen Investment Trust was founded by the Labour Party in 2006, which became operational in January 2007. The Fishermen Investment Trust had a capital of 65 million rupees, consisting of 6.5 million shares valued at 10 rupees each. We are proud, and I'm proud to say, it was the government of Dr. Amgulam then subscribed 1.5 million shares in the name of the registered fishermen of Mauritius and Rodrigues, who are now, therefore, the shareholders of this fund. I further refer to the PQB 837, dated 27th July 2021, by the Honorable First Member of Grand River Northwest and Port West West, Honorable David, who asked the Honorable Minister of Blue Economy, Marine Resources, Fisheries and Shipping, I quote, whether in regard to the Fishermen Investment Trust, he will state the total number of shares and of shareholders thereof prior to the repeal of the Fishermen Investment Trust Act, indicating the reasons why the trust has not been operating since 2014. This PQ is still awaiting a written answer. I again ask the following questions. What is the amount of capital accrued in the trust? The population needs a formal guarantee that all the registered fishermen who are shareholders of the FIT, I will not call it FIT, as if in Creole, med fit dabaja. I will not do that. I respect that institution. Shareholders of FIT will receive all their due. Thank you for detailing the amount paid to CEOs. For political reasons, you have done that. But why didn't you mention the amount due to shareholders? I hope you will consider it befitting to answer these questions for the benefit of the fishermen. I hope you don't meet PCR Dakazi. I leave it to the population, again, to judge, to evaluate how the minister of this government can bring the debate amounting to free a budget and make fit into it. I am told that the government permits Zano or PCR.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I will, after the Fishermen Investment Trust, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to refer to Section 50 of the Finance Bill, where we are being asked to amend the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority Act, especially Sections 2, 4, 5, 17, and 39. Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank my friends and well-wishers who are small cane planters who enlightened me on the amendments we are talking today. I talked to planters and producers from my constituency and elsewhere, and they appreciate that government has announced in the budget 2021-2022 a historic decision for the sugar industry with a guaranteed purchase price of ₹3.50 per kilowatt hour of electricity produced from bagasse. When something is good, Mr. Speaker, sir, I have kept it as a practice. When something is good, I commend it. When something is not good, I analyze it critically. And here I am saying it is good. Thus, all planters and producers will benefit from a remuneration of 3,300 rupees per ton of sugar for bagasse. I concur the view of the Minister of Agro-Industry and Food Security to abolish the bagasse transfer price fund and consolidate the sugarcane sustainability fund and implement the national biomass framework under the Sugar Industry Efficiency Act. As per Finance Bill 2021-2022, it is noted that the distribution of bagasse proceeds will be effected out of the Sugarcane Sustainability Fund, an amount equivalent to the sugar entitlement. The following words in Section 39, subsection 3 of the MCIA Act number 40 of 2011 is being deleted. I quote, "Every planter shall, in addition, be entitled to receive out of the value of the bagasse sold, transferred or utilized, an amount equivalent to the fraction represented by the quantity of cane supplied by him over the quantity of canes milled at the factory in that crop year," and replaced by, I quote, "Every planter or producer, as the case may be, shall, in addition, be entitled to receive out of the contribution made to the Sugarcane Sustainability Fund in respect of the proceeds of bagasse, an amount equivalent to his sugar entitlement." Mr. Speaker, sir, the real bone of contention is about the proposed distribution at the rate per ton of sugar. This distribution is detrimental to small planters, whom I will refer as vulnerable planters. Generally, these small planters have lower extraction rate due to high percentage of extraneous matter in the cane supplied to the mills. The higher the percentage of fiber, the lower is the sucrose content. It is the producers, that is, the estates, that will benefit from this method of payment, and small planters will thus be doubly penalized for highly extraneous matter producing more electricity. Let me inform the House that I will mention an equation. Sugar accruing is equal to weight of cane supply times extraction rate. It is not a secret to anyone that small planters have lower cane yields and extraction rates than that of the producer of the corporate sector. Electricity is produced from bagasse, that is, the fiber from the cane. The higher the percentage of fiber, the lower is the sucrose content. Let me quote from page 114 of the report 2015 of LMC International on the economic, social, and environmental impact on Mauritius of abolition of internal quotas in EU market. I quote, "Bagasse costs nothing, as all the costs to produce it are met by sugar activity." Mr. Speaker, sir, sharing bagasse based on sugar entitlement means giving 22% of the total bagasse proceeds to sugar mills, over and above the 22% of sugar representing the cost of manufacture of raw sugar. The steam and electricity required for manufacture of sugar is provided by the power producers. The Mauritius Sugar Syndicate pays the millers for refining sugar and production of assorted special sugars. The existing provision of payment based on the quantity of cane supplied under Section 39, subsection 3 of the MCIA Act number 40 of 2011 is justified to these vulnerable planters. Mr. Speaker, sir, with an extraction rate of 90 kg per ton cane, around 11.110 tons cane is required to produce 1 ton of sugar, whereas with extraction rate of 60 kg per ton cane, around 16.670 tons cane is required to produce 1 ton of sugar. The MCIA has to safeguard the interests of the 10,000 remaining small planters so that they continue with sugarcane cultivations. The object of the MCIA is to monitor, oversee, and coordinate all activities relating to and ensure a fair, efficient, and effective administration and operation of the cane industry. On behalf of these small planters, I'm making an appeal to the Honorable Minister of Agro-Industry and Food Security. I'm making a request for a fairer and more equitable distribution of bagasse proceeds on the basis of ton of cane supplied. This will immensely help these small cane planters to breathe amidst the economic suffocation they are currently undergoing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now refer to Section 52 of the Finance Bill, where the Mauritius Qualifications Authority Act is being amended. I will comment on Section 5, FA, which will confer the MQA the legal right, I quote, to approve non-award courses dispensed by training institutions and employers. And Section 18.2, CCA, I quote, for non-award courses dispensed by training institutions and employers, the approval and withdrawal of approval of such courses and any other matter relating thereto. The above Sections 5FA and 18.2CA are a clear example of how this government operates and functions. One step ahead and one step backward. The government is amending what it had itself amended. They are backpedaling on what they had proposed, artful as they are. They will justify this move as well as the way they are going to backpedal, and because they have mastered what I call the art of equivocation. There are some over there who love literature, so I will ask them to see the meaning of equivocation. They are very good at, because many of these equivocators, some time back, they were on another side, and now they have just joined this ship. I will not call them turncoat. Let me refresh the memory of everyone, especially those on the other side of the house. In 2019, the MQA used to approve non-award courses which were under the HRDC, and these courses were refundable. A registered training center or a company or an approved MQA trainer could apply for the approval of non-award courses, and accreditation officers at the MQA would review and then approve or refuse the application. Later on, through the Business Facilitation Miscellaneous Provisions Act on 25th July 2019, I think around 29 acts were amended. One of those 29 acts was the MQA Act, whereby the same section regarding the approval of non-award courses was repealed. And then HRDC took over, and it was the HRDC which had the onus to approve non-award courses with its existing staff. The staff of the HRDC did not have the expertise to vet and approve of non-award courses. This change in 2019 created a lot of confusion and frustration in the training industry. The requirement of trainer certificate was also repealed. Mr. Speaker, sir, now with the amendment to the MQA Act, the MQA will henceforth have the right, I quote, to approve non-award courses dispensed by the training institutions and employers. Mr. Speaker, sir, stakeholders have the following questions. 1, will the trainer certificate be required again? 2, how will the MQA approve these non-award courses? 3, what will happen to the non-award courses which were approved by HRDC? 4, what does the HRDC annual report show? 5, doesn't the report reveal how badly this institution is being managed? It is an institution where an estimated 1 billion rupees is collected through levy contributed by Mauritian employers, and the 1 billion rupees is transferred to the HRDC by the MRA. But how much of this 1 billion rupees is used? Only around 35% of it is used. What happens to the rest? What happens to the remaining 650 million rupees at a time when we have to face the adverse effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we are looking for means and ways to support our unemployed youth and our unemployed population? A judicious use of the 650 million rupees could have highly helped our training institutions and our workforce. But who cares? The private training sector employs over 5,000 people directly. But it is a pity that this sector has been neglected for the last 5 years. No meeting has been held by its representative, despite several requests made by the Association of Private Training Institutions. No facilities have been allocated to this training sector to boost it up. This private training sector is managing nearly on its own without any support. Many companies use non-award courses to bring international expertise to train their staff. Let me remind the House of that. Thanks to these non-award courses, many well-known speakers, such as Robin Sharma, Shiv Khera, and others have come to Mauritius to deliver talks and help different companies in upskilling their employees. Obviously, we Mauritians, we benefit a lot from such exposure. However, these private training institutions help with positive forex inflow as they cater international students as well. This zigzagging regarding policy decisions adversely impact on the training sector. And let us hope that this amendment will not be repealed in the days to come. Mr. Speaker, sir, after discussing the amendments of Fishermen Investment Trust Act and the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority Act, let me come to some less sweet but juicier amendments of the Finance Bill. Less sweet because of the ramifications therein, and juicier for those who thrive on legal loopholes to make millions at all points in time, be it during a pandemic or not. I am referring to the proposed amendments to Section 6 of the Bill of Rate Transfer, Section 70 of the Public-Private Partnership Act, and Section 73 of the Public Procurement Act, because they are related in one way or the other in the award of PPP and BOT projects. By attracting private capital and expertise, such projects, if well designed and selected, can boost investment for higher growth. However, they are also a means for governments facing high debt ratios to engage in off-balance sheet financing in order to limit the increase in indebtedness. The framework for the proper design, selection, and evaluation of these projects is therefore critical. Principles of efficiency, fairness, transparency, and accountability must be ensured for good governance. The proposed amendments dilute these principles. Mr. Speaker, sir, now I will refer to Section 73 of the Finance Bill, which requests us to amend the Public Procurement Act. As regards to Section 25B, competitive negotiations, I would like to point out that the Public Procurement Act presently makes provision for special circumstances for negotiation, where it may be carried out with a bidder or supplier. Hence, Mr. Speaker, sir, the main objective of public procurement is to acquire goods and services and to undertake works that are required by government for delivery for its services to the citizens in most economic, efficient, and effective manner while adhering to the principles of good governance. However, the introduction of the competitive negotiation without a proper competitive bidding exercise seems to be dangerous. Competitive negotiation without a bidding exercise can give opportunities to public bodies, hence public officials, to bypass all necessary and transparent procedures.
Try to conclude.
This, 30 minutes? Yes. This government, through the amendment of the Finance Bill, Section 25B, is merely sugarcoating emergency procurement and calling it competitive negotiation. However, they do not clearly or adequately define what competitive negotiations are. It is deliberately and intentionally left vague, open to interpretations. The word competitive shall replace emergency, but will be doing the same thing. The government will be able to choose any two companies. For example, for the sake of, I can mention, we can call one company Petit Copain Pack and the other company Petit Copain Blister of its choice, and act as if a competitive negotiation was done and the best was chosen. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me quote what the Director of Audit said in his report. Lapses were noted in the procurement of medical equipment and supplies in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. These lapses included absence of proper documentation at the different stages of the emergency procurement process, non-compliance with the legal requirements, and inadequate assessment of fairness and reasonableness of prices quoted by suppliers. As a result, there was inadequate assurance that the principle of value for money and transparency had been adhered to. Mr. Speaker, sir, the above remarks are not from a member of the opposition. This is what we can read in the audit report on page 8. Let me refer to the report of the Director of Audit again, who on page 43 writes, the lack of monitoring in the midst of the crisis has resulted in some 94 million rupees paid for defective ventilators, 853.7 million for medical disposables purchased from companies which had no history of providing medical products to the government.
1 minute left.
Okay. Now, Mr. Speaker, so we should develop and devise an infallible monitoring mechanism to prevent loopholes, to open the gateway for prowling Alibabas from plundering public funds. I have been told that many Alibabas are prowling like salivating foxes when they read about this amendment regarding competitive negotiations. I am concluding, Mr. Speaker, sir. What is the public expecting from the Public Procurement Act when it is being amended? Mauritians are expecting the amendment to lead to more transparency, more accountability, in an urge to embrace good practices of good governance. There is no such urgency or emergency which can warrant the sidelining of accountability and transparency. Nothing justifies the flouting of good governance, especially when it involves public funds. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mon intervention cet après-midi sur le Finance Bill concernera uniquement les modifications qui seront apportées à la Gambling Regulatory Authority, plus particulièrement la section 35 de ce texte de loi. Un texte de loi qui, je dois le rappeler, est amendé systématiquement chaque année depuis 2015 par ce gouvernement et pas nécessairement pour les bonnes raisons. Au-delà du simple fait que les nouveaux amendements qui sont proposés à la section 35 du JRA Act vont effacer les 2 siècles d'existence du Mauritius Stuff Club, considéré comme un patrimoine national, mais aussi reconnu dans cette partie du monde. Cette nouvelle section, Monsieur le Président, vient donc changer toutes les données dans l'organisation des courses à Maurice. En effet, une fois que le Finance Bill sera voté, la JRA sera appelée à créer une Horse Racing Division qui, selon la section 35-15C, sera responsable de l'organisation des courses à Maurice, alors que jusqu'ici, c'est le MTC, puis le MTC Sports and Leisure qui a cette responsabilité. Toujours selon cette même section, la Horse Racing Division s'occupera aussi des prélèvements sanguins sur les chevaux, préparera le calendrier des courses, le programme officiel qu'on appelle la race card, contrôlera aussi l'achat des chevaux, la licence des jockeys et des écuries, alors que depuis peu, la GAE s'occupe aussi du comité d'appel. Je dois souligner, Monsieur le Président, que ce comité d'appel est déjà un échec. À peine a-t-il commencé ses opérations, puisque ceux nommés par la GAE sont en situation de conflit d'intérêts. Il est clair qu'avec ces amendements, le MTC, qui détient l'affiliation avec la Fédération internationale des autorités hippiques et de l'Asian Racing Conference, s'occupera uniquement de tondre le gazon et du bon fonctionnement des stalles de départ. Ma première réflexion, Monsieur le Président, à propos de ces amendements est la suivante. Que vont devenir les quelques 3500 employés, directs et indirects, du MTC? Ne risquent-ils pas de perdre leur emploi en ces temps déjà difficiles? Tout laisse croire que la réponse est dans l'affirmative, car les amendements laissent entrevoir que les employés du MTC et du MTCSL ne conserveront pas leur emploi, à moins que l'honorable ministre des Finances vienne nous démontrer le contraire. Autre question, Monsieur le Président, qu'on est en droit de se poser dans le sillage de ces amendements, et si le gouvernement est vraiment en train d'appliquer les recommandations faites dans le rapport de la commission d'enquête sur les courses mené par 3 Britanniques, nommément le rapport Paris. Après avoir parcouru ce volumineux document, j'ai pris note que le rapport Paris a beaucoup insisté sur la création d'une Mauritius Horse Racing Authority totalement indépendante, et non un département qui opérera sous la tutelle de la GAE. Drôle d'indépendance, pourrait-on dire, Monsieur le Président. À la page 50 de ce même rapport, les 3 Britanniques indiquent, et je cite, « The Commission strongly recommends the creation of a new body, the Mauritius Horse Racing Authority, which separates regulation and governance from race day functions and which introduces an important element of independence to such matters. No employee of a new Mauritius Horse Racing Authority should be allowed to be a member of the MTC. » Fin de citation. En clair, Monsieur le Président, le rapport Paris a recommandé la création d'une instance dotée de son propre conseil d'administration, indépendante et composée d'experts et non des proches du pouvoir. Or, Monsieur le Président, la plupart des amendements qui sont proposés à la section 35 ne se trouvent pas dans le rapport Paris. Ils ont été proposés par ceux qui ont un agenda caché et des intentions obscures qui ne serviraient que leurs propres desseins et non ceux du sport hippique. Les faits, Monsieur le Président, nous ont démontré comment, depuis 2015, ce gouvernement bafoue les règles en matière de gestion et d'ingérence politique dans les affaires des entités qui tombent sous sa responsabilité. Et la GAE, que certains journalistes ont qualifiée de cirque, n'échappe pas à cette règle. Et le dernier exemple qu'on peut citer, c'est le choix délibéré de la GAE de ne pas accorder au président du MTC sa Personal Management License. Et maintenant, Monsieur le Président, imaginez-vous ce qui pourrait se passer lorsque la GAE, à travers la Horse Racing Division, aura le droit absolu de choisir ceux qui opéreront dans cette industrie. Et le cas du bookmaker AJ et son catamaran party, en compagnie des jockeys, sont encore frais dans les mémoires. Pour rappel, le MTC avait objecté à ce que sa licence soit renouvelée, mais la GAE avait sommé le MTC de le laisser opérer. Et si ce n'est pas de l'ingérence, Monsieur le Président, cela y ressemble beaucoup. Loin de moi, Monsieur le Président, l'idée de vouloir dire que rien ne doit changer au sein de l'industrie hippique. Un secteur qui brasse des milliards de roupies et qui ramène plus de 800 millions annuellement dans les caisses de l'État. Mais le public et les turfistes en particulier peuvent-ils faire confiance à la JRA alors qu'ils savent et sont parfaitement conscients que cette loi a été modifiée pour servir certains intérêts personnels? Monsieur le Président, où se trouve la séparation des pouvoirs et la bonne gouvernance comme il est recommandé dans le rapport Paris? Et je me demande si avec ces amendements, la JRA ne se contredit pas elle-même. En 2018 et 2019, Monsieur le Président, la JRA n'avait pas autorisé le MTC de mettre en place un comité d'appel sur la base que le club ne pouvait être juge et partie. De ce fait, la JRA avait donc créé un nouveau comité d'appel en vertu de la section 7 de la JRA Act. Mais aujourd'hui, avec l'introduction de la section 35 dans la JRA Act, cette dernière devient de surcroît à la fois organisatrice et régulatrice des courses à Maurice. Pire encore, Monsieur le Président, c'est cette même JRA qui accorde des licences pour toutes les activités concernant les paris. Ce qui veut dire qu'il n'y aura pas de séparation de pouvoir et que plus que jamais, la notion de juge et partie sera appliquée dans toutes les sphères de cette industrie. Tout, absolument tout, va donc passer par la Gambling Regulatory Authority et sa Horse Racing Division. Encore une fois, Monsieur le Président, c'est contraire à la bonne gouvernance et contraire aux recommandations des Britanniques. Monsieur le Président, même si je ne suis pas un spécialiste de la chose hippique, je me pose néanmoins certaines questions. Comment un département et division peut-il remplacer une autorité? Comment sera constitué le personnel de la Horse Racing Division? Comment fonctionnera-t-elle? Est-ce que toutes les décisions prises par la Horse Racing Division devront être approuvées par le conseil d'administration de la JRA? Et finalement, avec quelle facilité et rapidité les décisions seront-elles prises? Ce qui est bien plus grave dans ces amendements, Monsieur le Président, c'est qu'il n'existe pas de réelles actions mises en œuvre pour protéger le public des bookmakers qui font des paris clandestins. Aucune mesure concrète pour réduire le blanchiment d'argent provenant de l'industrie des courses et des jeux en général. Où en est le projet de la JRA pour des paris sans argent liquide, c'est-à-dire le cashless betting? Celle qui avait préconisé cette formule a été forcée à la démission parce qu'elle était devenue gênante pour ceux qui tirent les ficelles derrière les rideaux. Tout comme l'anglais Paul Bibi, Monsieur le Président, l'ancien Integrity and Compliance Officer de la JRA, qui pourtant avait dénoncé ceux qui étaient impliqués dans les courses truquées. Monsieur le Président, chaque année, nous constatons la démarche pernicieuse du gouvernement qui amende la JRA à travers le Finance Bill pour cacher ses intentions de ne pas mettre en place un système de surveillance centrale des opérateurs de jeux, les bookmakers entre autres, ni aussi pour contrôler la fluctuation des codes des courses et contrôler les revenus des activités liées à cette industrie. Et dans une réponse à une question parlementaire le 7 juillet 2020, l'honorable ministre des Finances avait indiqué que depuis 2017, la MRA travaille sur une nouvelle plateforme appelée la Central Electronic Monitoring System pour assurer l'enregistrement, la surveillance et le contrôle en ligne et en continu de toutes les activités de Paris. Plus de 3 ans après, Monsieur le Président, nous sommes toujours à la case départ, alors que ce serveur aurait dû être une priorité. Lorsqu'il s'agit du contrôle des paris, il y a toujours des excuses toutes trouvées pour ne pas mettre en place un serveur central. Et aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président, l'arrogance du gouvernement se reflète dans ces amendements, car il est clair que le processus de réflexion des spécialistes du secteur ne sont pas pris en compte. Et dans un autre ordre d'idée, je me demande si le gouvernement peut donner des instructions, des informations précises, surtout transparentes, sur le fonds créé en vertu de l'article 11A de la GRA Act. En effet, ce fonds pour le jeu responsable avait été créé pour protéger le public et pour la formation du personnel de la GRA. Tous les opérateurs de jeux à Maurice, sauf la Loterie nationale, contribuent à hauteur de 2% de leur revenu brut. Et selon mes informations, ils contribuent depuis 2016 à ce fonds. Et il serait bon de savoir comment cet argent est dépensé et j'espère que le ministre des Finances viendra avec des réponses lors de son summing up. Par conséquent, Monsieur le Président, n'est-il pas juste de demander qu'un comité composé d'experts des courses soit mis en place afin d'étudier le rapport Paris et de mettre en œuvre les recommandations de manière efficace, plutôt que de procéder dans le désordre. Par exemple, Monsieur le Président, la British Horse Racing Authority est complètement indépendante de l'UK Gambling Commission, qui est l'équivalent de la GRA. La British Horse Racing Authority est très impliquée dans l'organisation des courses, incluant la question de l'intégrité, mais elle n'est pas engagée au niveau du betting. Monsieur le Président, la British Horse Racing Authority a certes énormément de pouvoir au sein de l'industrie hippique en Angleterre, mais cet organisme a démontré tout au long de son existence qu'il fonctionne dans une transparence la plus totale. S'il faut, Monsieur le Président, revoir le fonctionnement de l'industrie hippique locale dans son ensemble, il est important que l'avenir de cette industrie soit placé entre les mains de personnes compétentes qui ont fait leurs preuves. Et au risque de me répéter, je dirai encore une fois, ce qui s'est passé dans le cas de M. Paul Bibi donne à réfléchir sur les valeurs réelles qui animent les personnes qui sont actuellement à la tête de la GRA. Et personnellement, j'ai des doutes qu'ils puissent travailler sans l'ingérence des personnes aux intentions occultes. Et pour conclure, Monsieur le Président, je suis d'avis qu'il est important d'avoir tous les acteurs, incluant le gouvernement, autour d'une table. Établir une vision, une stratégie, un plan de travail, se fixer des objectifs clairs et réalisables dans un délai défini. Il n'y a que de cette façon qu'on pourra faire avancer cette industrie. Au cas contraire, c'est la mort assurée. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, the Speaker. Honourable Kalichand.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for providing me with the opportunity to clear the air on some misconception or misinterpretation being circulated concerning some amendments to the Workers' Rights Act being made through the finance bill before the House today. I have recently heard a few trade unionists being critical on the changes being brought to the Workers' Rights Act. However, I hasten to say that majority of the trade unionists have welcomed the amendments being proposed. And let me remind the House, especially Honourable Utim, who has been the only one who have formulated critics on one or two amendments. When did you intervene? Last Tuesday. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is our government since 2015, which made great leaps forward in terms of protecting the workers' rights. And we shall not deviate from our philosophy. It is the same government which has introduced groundbreaking measures, social measures, like the minimum wage, the portable retirement gratuity fund, thus giving a long overdue and most deserved dignity to the merchant workers. The amendment proposed the Workers' Rights Act in this bill are in line with the same philosophy which was enacted in 2019. They are mainly aimed at clarifying the provision of some sections of the Act for a more effective application thereof, so as to ensure that no person is left behind in the application of the law, and secondly, by reinforcing the protection of the rights of the workers in respect to their remuneration, income support, conditions of employment, and job security in the present socio-economic context marked by the adverse effect of COVID-19 pandemic on the economy and the labor market. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, some amendments are purely of technical nature. There are also amendments that will reinforce the rights of the workers in the existing provision, and others, new provisions granting workers new rights and benefits that are also aimed at facilitating the recovery of unwarranted payments. Mr. Speaker, sir, I shall not dwell on the technical amendments, which in a sense do not alter the substance of the provisions concerned, but which are aimed at further clarifying the provision to avoid ambiguity and also facilitate the application of the law. I shall therefore focus my intervention on the main amendment today. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 2, Interpretation, and Section 3, Application of the Act. Presently, the definition of worker in Section 2 and the scope of the application of the Act in Section 3 do not cover the workers that would be concerned by the new provision of Section 51A. This section, that is 51A, relates to provisions to be made by regulations as regard to conditions to have access to a workplace for workers who are not vaccinated or do not have a PCR test result, negative PCR test result. Thus, for the purpose of Section 51A, Section 2 and Section 3 are being amended to cover and include in the definition of worker any worker or atypical worker, that is, who is not employed on a standard contract, for example, freelance worker, irrespective of their salary cap, and any employee in the statutory body or in the public service other than a public officer whose conditions of employment are specified by the PRB. Mr. Speaker, sir, the concept of compromise agreement, which was introduced last year, 2 years ago in the Workers' Rights Act, to protect workers who were made to sign an agreement which was unfair. The compromise agreement ensures that a worker be informed of his rights and be advised whether a settlement proposed by an employer in resolution to a dispute is reasonable and acceptable before the worker sign an agreement. Otherwise, the agreement is considered to be null and void. It has been observed that some employers are circumventing this provision and are making workers accept an unfair agreement by way of a transaction under the Civil Code. Mr. Speaker, sir, some employers are even imposing upon workers agreement by way of a transaction which often are at the disadvantage of the workers. Since transaction made under the Civil Code is deemed to be a final discharge, and thus it cannot be subject to any vetting by a tierce party, and most importantly, cannot be challenged in court. The amendment being proposed today aims at reinforcing the application and enforcement of the compromise agreement. Thus, with this agreement, a compromise agreement will be made mandatory insofar as it concerns a worker, and a transaction made under the Civil Code will not apply where a compromise agreement has been reached. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have introduced the concept of protective order in the Workers' Rights Act to increase the chance of workers to recover any amount owed to them as remuneration in a more expeditory manner. The section on protective order provides that, and it's good that I remind the House of the existing provision, that the supervising officer of my ministry may apply to a judge in chambers for a protective order in the amount of a remuneration due to a worker, and a judge in chambers may order that the property of an employer shall not be disposed, be mortgaged, attached, or sold in execution and vested in the liquidator when the property of the owner is sequestrated without an order of the judge. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is common knowledge that the process for the recovery of an unpaid remuneration in court is a long and tedious one. C'est un véritable parcours du combattant. It has also been observed that when a judgment or an order is delivered in favor of workers, some employers still do not pay them their dues. These workers are thus penalized a second time. And as a result, they have to apply for a warrant to levy at their own expense to have the judgment executed. This process is costly and very complex. Very often, poor workers simply give up. Justice is therefore not done to these workers. Workers are even more penalized when it comes to recovery of their dues when an enterprise is placed under receivership, under administration, or is placed in liquidation. Since the process of realization of assets takes time, my ministry, in most of the cases, cannot ascertain if payment is effectively done. Also, very often they are paid only a small proportion of the amount they would normally be entitled to. We have also observed in the recent past that some unscrupulous employers disposed of several of their assets before their enterprise are placed under receivership administration or liquidation, and resources are consequently not available to pay workers their dues. Mr. Speaker, sir, henceforth, with the amendment proposed, the application for a protective order will apply where a worker has failed to pay wages in lieu of notice and severance allowance to a worker following an order made by the redundancy board or a judgment of the industrial court, in circumstances where an employer has failed to pay an amount due under the PRGF, and where a receiver manager, an administrator, or a liquidator has not paid a worker his or her remuneration. The process to be followed before an application for a protective order has also been simplified. Legal action can now also be initiated after the completion of an inquiry. This process takes less time than the recourse to a compliance notice. Thus, for example, an application for a protective order can be made after an inquiry has confirmed that a worker has not been paid the gratuity payable under the PRGF. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is truly another step forward in the protection of the fundamental rights of the workers of this country. I shall now come to Section 40, Wage Guarantee Fund account. Under the existing provision, the Wage Guarantee Fund provides for a payment up to 57 rupees to a worker who have not been paid his dues when an enterprise which employed him is considered to be insolvent by the court, by the Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, sir, actually, there are other cases where workers whose employment have been terminated on ground of insolvency and do not benefit from the financial support from the Wage Guarantee Fund. These cases concern, for example, enterprises which are declared insolvent following a resolution of the creditors during a watershed meeting in accordance with the provision of the Insolvency Act. These workers are penalized and are deprived of their basic means of subsistence. Their situation is even more precarious when an enterprise is in liquidation. The amendment will address the issue by extending the entitlement under the Wage Guarantee Fund to other circumstances where an enterprise is considered to be insolvent, as I mentioned earlier. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to COVID-19 restriction of access, Specified Institution Regulation 2021, made under the Quarantine Act 2020, provision is made in the Act for the Minister to make regulation to cater for conditions regarding payment of remuneration or grant of leave in relation to absences. The regulation would apply to a worker employed in a specified health and training institution or in other institutions as may be prescribed where the worker cannot have access to his workplace as a result of him or her not being vaccinated or not being able to produce a negative test result. Section 59 of the Workers' Rights Act, the existing legislation limits the refund of transport expenses only to workers traveling by public bus transport. With the introduction of the light rail transit system, many workers who have adopted this new means of transport are presently being penalized inasmuch as they are not being refunded transport fares when commuting by metro. The amendment proposed will henceforth cover this category of workers as well. Mr. Speaker, sir, presently there are workers who are employed on one or more fixed-term contracts, drawing a salary of exceeding 607 rupees annually, who are paid a gratuity at the end of their contract. These workers are actually using a loophole in the law to make a claim for severance allowance in court despite being paid a gratuity at the end of their contract. With a view to addressing this issue of double payment for these contractual workers, a provision is being now made for this category of workers to refrain from claiming severance allowance on expiry of their contract, thus avoiding double payment. The Redundancy Board was introduced in the Workers' Rights Act in 2019 to protect workers from abusive termination of employment for economic reasons. Nearly 2 years after its setup, I must say I am amply satisfied that the Redundancy Board has upheld to the challenge. The statistics shows that the board is a shield against mass and unfair termination of employment, Mr. Speaker, sir. Members on the other side of the House shall recall that in 2008, in the wake of the economic crisis, the Labour Party and the PMSD government replaced the Labour Act by the Employment Rights Act and abolished the termination of contract service board to facilitate the termination of employment at will. Here, Mr. Speaker, sir, in spite of the heavy impact of the pandemic on our economy and the labour market, our government has maintained all safeguards set in the Workers' Rights Act to protect jobs. I wish to remind the House that regulations made in June 2021 for the interdiction to lay off workers has been extended until December this year. I would also like to emphasize on the fact that the new amendment will apply only to distressed enterprises intending to reduce their workforce on the ground of restructuring for financial reasons. The objective of the amendment is not to encourage massive laying off as it is being portrayed, as it was mentioned by Honorable Utim. The aim is to protect as many jobs as possible. It will only apply in circumstances where financial assistance would not help to salvage distressed enterprises, which are already over-indebted and which will eventually, which eventually may become insolvent and lay off all of its workers. Mr. Speaker, sir, here I would like to reassure the workers that, firstly, employers shall continue to notify Redundancy Board of any case of intended reduction of workforce or closure. Secondly, employers will still have to seek financial assistance before referring a notification to the board. It is only when an application has been turned down that an employer may refer a case of intended reduction of workforce to the board. Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendment provides for very stringent procedures. For example, an employer opting for this procedure will be required to satisfy the Redundancy Board that, firstly, the enterprise is over-indebted and any further debt would increase the risk of the enterprise being insolvent. Secondly, the enterprise has a restructuring plan approved by the board of directors. And thirdly, the employer would have to state the number of jobs to be saved. This amendment will therefore not affect in any manner the safeguard set out to protect jobs. Indeed, by allowing enterprises in this particular situation to restructure, we are avoiding a massive termination of employment and securing as many jobs as possible. Furthermore, the amendment also provides that a termination of employment shall be deemed to be unjustified where the employer has failed to submit information justifying its difficult financial situation. Thus, the board may order either reinstatement or payment of severance allowance at the rate of 3 months per year of service. Mr. Speaker, sir, with a view to ensuring that enterprises in strategic and vulnerable sectors, such as airport, port, facing financial difficulties, may continue their activity, provision is made so that an enterprise which has recourse to the redundancy board to reduce its workforce may rely on a quality and competent workforce to meet its operational challenges as a result of reduction of workforce. I now come to the function of the board. Mr. Speaker, sir, with a view to promoting an early settlement as is presently the case at the Industrial Court, the mandate of the Redundancy Board is being reviewed inasmuch as it is being broadened to empower the board to formally conduct conciliation and mediation in the best interest of the parties, especially in broad line cases. The conciliation and mediation shall be conducted on the following principle. Firstly, there should be consent of both workers and employers. Secondly, the board shall, during conciliation or mediation meeting, consider the following options: reinstatement of workers or their re-engagement in other enterprises, training to be provided at the cost of the employers to develop the employability of the laid-off workers who will be engaged in other enterprises and in other trades, or payment of a compensation of not less than 15 days remuneration for every period of 12 months of continuous employment where reduction is considered to be justified. Provisions are also being made so that the board continues its normal proceedings where no settlement has been reached at the conciliation and mediation meeting. Mr. Speaker, sir, it has been brought to my attention that there are several cases where laid-off workers cannot benefit from the payment of a TUB due to the fact that they could not make the application within the prescribed delay on account of their state of health. I am introducing a new provision in Section 84 for this category of workers so that they be entitled to benefit from the transition unemployment benefit. The only conditions they have to satisfy is that they have to produce a medical certificate to prove their state of health at the time they could not apply. Moreover, it has also been observed that many workers who are refusing job placement offers related to their job competencies and instead prefer to continue benefiting from the TUB under the workfare program, with a view to encourage workers to return to the labor market where jobs relating to their competencies are available. Provisions is being made in this new section to stop payment of TUB where a worker declines for 3 consecutive times a job or a training offer in line with his profile and qualification. Mr. Speaker, sir, as regard to the recovery of overpayment, in Section 86, with a view to recover overpayment of TUB made to a worker, a new provision appears where it concerns a worker who fails to notify the ministry that he has been gainfully employed or continues to be paid the TUB during that period. that worker would thus be committing an offense. And on conviction, the court may order the worker to refund the amount of TUB he or she received. My ministry has also been apprised of cases where some unscrupulous employers who regularly lay off and re-employ workers on new contracts after a break of more than 28 days. In such cases, it is the workfare program that is funding the remuneration of these workers each time during these short period of unemployment. And I was quite surprised to learn that big companies, conglomerates are practicing this abuse. Hence, Mr. Speaker, sir, a new provision is being made whereby these employers would be required to refund the total amount of the transition unemployment benefit paid to the workers. It is good to know that for non-compliance of this section, an employer shall, on conviction, be liable to a fine of not exceeding 100,000 rupees. So be on your guard. Mr. Speaker, sir, this new amendment will better protect workers against precarious employment. We are also providing for a procedure for recovery at source in cases of non-payment of contribution to the workfare program. A new amendment is being provided for the sharing of information between the supervising officer of my ministry, that is the Ministry of Labour, Human Resource Development and Training, and the Director General of the MRA for the purpose of collection and recovery of contribution made under the National Saving Fund Act. And I come to the PRGF. At section 87, a new provision is made for a jockey or a truck rider providing services in the horse racing sector or any such category of worker as may be prescribed to be entitled for the payment of a gratuity under the PRGF. This was not previously the case. It has been considered appropriate to explicitly specify that this category be entitled to the payment of a gratuity under the PRGF in view of the uncertainty of their occupation status, since they may not fall within the definition of worker nor a atypical worker. In section 89, Mr. Speaker, sir, a new provision has been made to specify that a worker whose retirement benefit are payable under the sugar industry pension fund are not eligible to join the portable retirement gratuity fund, as is presently the case for a private pension scheme. I wish to point out that a safeguard has been provided in section 109, which provides that an employer shall not require an employee to retire before the age of 65 and to guarantee the retirement benefit paid under the sugar industry pension fund, which shall not be less than the gratuity payable on retirement under the PRGF, that is 15 days remuneration per year of service. Mr. Speaker, sir, furthermore, I wish to state that workers of the sugar industry who are members of the SIPF shall continue to be entitled to the total amount of gratuity payable under the sugar industry remuneration regulation plus the retirement benefits under the SIPF. With a view to protecting the health and security of workers and the rights of workers to be provided with information to prepare their defense in court, the issue listed in section 123 to be considered as an offense have been broadened to cover situations such as where an employer fails to convey a worker who suffers from injury or illness at workplace to a medical institution, and where an employer fails to submit to a worker a copy of minutes of proceedings of the disciplinary committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, I took the time to come up with all these pertinent amendments that concern the Workers' Rights Act, because we, as a responsible and caring government, we will not accept misinterpretations by some with a clear objective of casting doubts on our will to protect workers of this country. We have responded promptly to COVID-19 pandemic as from March 2020 by granting wage assistance so as to protect a maximum number of jobs. This government, Mr. Speaker, sir, thus remains the shield against hire and fire. And I am sure that the amendments that are being proposed today will act as an additional protective net. Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement sera toujours du côté de la classe des travailleurs. Et je vous dis merci pour votre attention, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable Mir, you have 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me the opportunity to briefly take the time of the House to comment on a few clauses of the Finance Bill, particularly the Civil Status Act, Dangerous Drug Act, Foundations Act, Pharmacy Act, and the Gambling Regulatory Act. Keeping in mind the essence of time and the voluminous nature of the bill, I have restricted myself briefly to each part I've just mentioned. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regards to the Civil Status Act, Section 13, after subsection 1A, there is a new subsection which is being inserted, and I do welcome the move of registering sex as undetermined, particularly due to ambiguous genitalia of newborn, be it at live or stillbirth. As a consultant gynecologist by profession, I have witnessed the trauma and distraught of so many expecting parents, and I'm sure this amendment will bring certainly some comfort. Mr. Speaker, sir, but the bill could have gone a little bit further. Interestingly, only 2 weeks ago, the American Medical Association recommended that sex should be removed as a legal designation on the public domain of birth certificates. Probably that goes a bit too far. Yet, they still maintain that it could be mentioned on the notification of birth. In the world that we live today, one has to anticipate the unnecessary burden on individuals whose current gender identity does not align with their designation at birth when they register for school, sports, adoption, or even get married, or for personal records. Mr. Speaker, sir, therefore the bill should make provisions to cater for the foreseeable future where lawmakers in time must consider the right to allow people to amend their gender identities that reflect the physical characteristic of either male or female should there have been genuine ambiguity at birth or early in neonatal period. Therefore, the consideration of a gender-neutral, a new concept, a new term, designation on birth certificates will probably be justified alternative option in the future. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now make a brief comment on the Dangerous Drug Act. Section 2 of Part 1 deals with interpretation of various entities and considering the scourge of synthetic drugs that prevail in many regions of our country. It will help lawmakers and enforcers alike if the definition of synthetic drug were included so that there would not be any ambiguity or doubts as to the toxic mix of harmful material used. Mr. Speaker, sir, were the contents of synthetic drugs well defined in terms of its composition, the insertion of new section 4A, agency cooperation, particularly at subsection 2B, would help further to tighten those online dealers, which is a new group of people who bypass customs department and trying to evade the strict requirements of which types of chemical materials that can come in the country. They do import various substances and precursors that are used in the manufacture of synthetic drugs and evade listed items on Schedule 4. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 4A, which is being inserted in this amendment for the purpose of agency cooperation, has at subsection A any substance listed in the first, second, third, and fourth schedule. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, information regarding these substances need to be precise. The latest audit report is categorical. These schedules were not properly updated and thereby restricted the application and enforcement of laws. Alignment of these particular schedules, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Dangerous Act to the updated United Nations tables of narcotics, psychotropic substances, precursors must be precise and in not an ad hoc manner. Mr. Speaker, sir, amendment at section 25 is to include subsection 3 and 4, which focuses on specified persons to handle dangerous drugs. The audit report was once again adamant that the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Pharmacy Board did not effectively meet its mandatory licensing role to screen, track, and ensure accountability for all dangerous drug handling persons under the Dangerous Drug Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, therefore such new amendment will only make sense if only the regulatory authority, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Pharmacy Board, discharge their responsibilities effectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 27 of Section 3 of the same Act is being repealed and replaced by a new section, new subsection. Will this new subsection answer the very important issue of monitoring consumption trends of dangerous drugs and its precursors that need to be submitted to the International Narcotics Control Board? Strangely enough, consumption patterns have more than doubled in 2 years. And surprisingly enough, the Ministry of Health and Wellness authorized their imports without questioning the increase in consumption. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now comment on Section 28 of the Act, which refers to the inspection by a designated officer. I know that the Dangerous Drug Act already stipulated for mandatory inspection of dangerous drug operators' premises at least once every 2 years, which was not carried out. Will this amendment to have police officers, custom officers, or any other person designated by the permanent secretary to ensure regular inspection, or what is really needed, a full review of the role of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Pharmacy Board, as regulators of dangerous drugs to ensure that those responsible do discharge their duties effectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, if full compliance of regulations that are applicable under the Pharmacy Act and the Dangerous Drug Act are not put in practice, then all these amendments that have been proposed will be a futile exercise with an already escalating drug problem in the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendment to the Foundation Act particularly the insertion of new Section 30A, is welcome, as it goes to raise awareness of its vulnerability of being used as a means to terrorist financing abuse and terrorism financing risk. Mr. Speaker, sir, however, it is also noted that the Section 39, new subsection 4B, gives power to the registrar to remove the name of the foundation from the register. There is unfortunately no information as to whether such evidence, and what evidence are we referring to here, the nature of evidence, is to be ascertained by which authorized Mauritian or foreign law enforcement agencies, institutions, because one is too aware of the bias of certain international law agencies against bona fide donors from certain parts of the world and easily labeled as terrorist organizations to suit their interests. Mr. Speaker, sir, at subsection 4B, part 2, I strongly suggest that the registrar must make available to all foundations a list of terrorist organizations, and these organizations that are listed to terrorist ones as labeled by the government of Mauritius, so that secretaries of foundations registered in Mauritius are well informed of the potential removal of the name of the foundation from the register should they have any dealings with them. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now briefly comment on the amendment of the Pharmacy Act, particularly inserting Section 25B, the Trusted Trader Certificate for importation of pharmaceutical products. The Pharmacy Act at Section 7 already for Trade and Therapeutics Committee at its Section 1A clearly stipulates that it does advise the board to matter relating to manufacture, importation of pharmaceutical products. And now what do we see? We see a new version, Mr. Speaker, sir. A new version to bypass stringent criteria as to quality, safety, efficacy of drugs, which were before, because due to the Trade and Therapeutics Committee, they had to comply with the certificate of good manufacturing practice and good manufacturing product. Today, if these amendments were true, any person can now apply directly to the board for a trusted trader certificate, and once the board approves same to be delivered, the board will recommend the Trusted Trader Committee for the applicant to import any specified pharmaceutical product from the specified supplier in the specified country during a specified time. Mr. Speaker, sir, the famous question is, who are those who are going to benefit and who will sit on the board and who nominated them to issue the Trusted Trader Certificate? Mr. Speaker, sir, the backdoor entry will allow many blue-eyed comrades, as I call them, to import pharmaceutical products irrespective of country of origin, quality, safety, and efficacy. The pharmacovigilance, which has been dormant and not fully active, must ensure that the standards of these pharmaceutical products are fit for public consumption. Mr. Speaker, sir, with these new holders of Trusted Trader Certificate, will these new holders of Trusted Trader Certificate ensure that their products, as I said, are fully accredited or certified? I'm skeptical, as those measures are meant to bypass these international standards criteria. Mr. Speaker, sir, such amendment is dangerous, and I suggest that safeguards be put in place for the safety and wellness of our population. Proper quality control is paramount before any such pharmaceutical product and on the shelves of our companies. I beg to note that these amendments are more geared to ease business for some importers, but nothing in the amendment has been mentioned with regard to quality, once again, efficacy, and safety of the products. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now comment on the proposed amendments in the Finance Bill to the Gambling Regulatory Act. I'm not a specialist of horse racing, but I'm concerned to see how, through this act, government, through the GRA, is trying to have a mainmise sur les courses hippiques à Maurice. Mr. Speaker, sir, first I intend to speak, if time allows, about the taking over of the rules of the racing for the MTC Sports Leisure Limited. And secondly, I shall comment on the institution of a new horse racing division and a purported new racing committee, all under the aegis of the board of the GIA. And lastly, the diminishing role of the horse racing organizer. Mr. Speaker, sir, the finance bill at section 35A1 proposed to delete the word horse racing organizer and for it to be replaced by horse racing division. On paper, this is only a change of word. In practice, the consequences are far more reaching. One should understand the effect of the change. Horse racing are governed by rules of racing, which for the parameters of how the sport shall be administered in practice. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's been the practice of horse racing that the horse racing organizer prepares and updates the rules of racing at the beginning of each season, and same get approved by the GRA as approved under the GRA Act of 2007. Mr. Speaker, sir, what the finance bill proposes today is that these rules of racing will no longer be prepared and drafted by the horse racing organizer altogether, but rather by a new horse racing division which will be accountable to the GRA. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot be by any stretch of imagination to say that the amendment will implement an independent body under the aegis of the GRA, because it is accountable to the same board where sits political nominees. There is no longer a regulator-licensee relationship, but a master and servant relationship by the manner in which the GRA wants to run the show. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 40 of the Act speaks of promoting confidence in public integrity of the gambling industry and horse racing industry. The Honourable Minister of Finance must review and rethink in it, as much it will not achieve public confidence if same regulator regulates gambling and horse racing. This brings me to the second part of this intervention on horse racing, and which concerns the setting of a new horse racing division at Section 15A of the Finance Bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, at this point, I want to refer to the Commission of Inquiry on Horse Racing of 2015, which was chaired by Mr. Richard Parry, together with two assessors, Dennis Gunn and Paul Scotney, to which I will refer to the Parry report. And on September, Mr. Speaker, sir, 2014, it is up to remind the House that it was the Labour Party under the government, under the Prime Ministership of Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, who took the decision to set up this Commission of Inquiry. The inquiry was completed 6 months after the investigation and was submitted to the government of what was then called l'Alliance Les Peuples in December 2015. Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendments in the Finance Bill, unfortunately, distort the propositions of the Parry report, twist and misrepresent those recommendations in an attempt to take over the organization of horse racing from the horse racing organizer. The Parry report states at Chapter 6, paragraph 16, and I quote, "The Commission considers there is a lack of leadership within the GRA and little or no evidence of no strategic plan to ensure that the authority's responsibilities under the Gambling Regulatory Authority are carried out." Mr. Speaker, sir, the Parry report in fact proposed the setting of a Mauritius Horse Racing Authority, and I stress upon the word authority, that is completely a separate entity from the Gambling Regulatory Authority, which shall separate the regulation and governance aspect of horse racing from race day functions. The aim of this proposal was to introduce an important element of independence to horse racing matters, similar to British Horse Racing Authority in UK and the Hong Kong Jockey Club in the United Kingdom. Two very good examples which could have been followed. Mr. Speaker, sir, may I refer to Section 15B1 of the Finance Bill, which propose that the horse racing division shall be administered and managed by a horse racing committee, which will be appointed by the board of GRA. The GRA will have the horse racing committee, the horse racing committee will have the horse racing division, and then they will inter alia issue directions and instructions to whoever will be, if there is not the death of the Mauritius Turf Club, then inter alia they are all within themselves giving instructions. Who will be the sole authority? Who will be giving the instruction when it comes to license? Which authority? Will it be the board, or will it be the horse racing division or the horse racing committee? What is clear, however, is that the board of the GRA wants to have total control of the committee as it required under that provision, that is the board which will appoint the committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to point out to the House that in December 2015, the L'Alliance des Peuples government had retained two external consultants, Mr. PS and Mr. PB, to advise them on how to implement the recommendation of the Paris report. And a second report has, I understand, been submitted to the government. So far, we have heard nothing about this. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 15C1F of the Financial Bill is proposed that the new racing committee shall be responsible for the preparation of the racing calendar, fixtures, listing, nominations, race cards. If that happens, the licensee may well have a claim for a breach of its constitutional right to protection its property. The preparation of calendar, racing calendar, fixtures list, nomination and race cards is an intellectual property that the Mauritius Turf Club and the Mauritius Turf Club newly formed company has acquired and developed over 200 years, and can legitimately expect that no government will come and strip them of such property. Mr. Speaker, sir, the manner in which the provision is couched does exactly this, and it opens the state to once again a further claim before the Supreme Court of Mauritius for a breach of probably constitutional right. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we look further at sections 15C10, it is proposed that the new horse racing committee shall set up the panel of racing stewards. Racing stewards are those responsible to ensure that rules of racing are enforced. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have demonstrated earlier how key responsibilities have been snatched from the MTCSL, and today these amendments come as to the last nail in the coffin for a 200-year-old institution which the Mauritius Turf Club has been as a horse racing organizer. Mr. Speaker, sir, to conclude, let me put those amendments in context. The government, through the GRA, currently have full control on gambling activities, a purpose for which the GRA had initially been legitimately set up. If those amendments are passed, the regulator will now have full command and influence on horse racing and gambling activities, a dangerous, toxic cocktail for wrongdoings, malpractices in the sport of Mauritius. Clearly, these amendments have a hidden agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Suspend the sitting for 30 minutes.